So Matt, between the two of us, you got 22, I got 26 years. That's a half century, right? So in your experience, what Army section, right, did you have the most difficulty with while on active duty?
Oh, finance, 100%.
Same with me. Finance, could never get it right. Which brings us, interestingly, to the topic today, and that is what to do when you're facing allegations of BAH fraud. And let me tell you, entitlements fraud is something that I see all the time. And usually you got these young prosecutors who say, oh, somebody's got BAH from San Francisco, that it must be fraudulent, which was really originated with CID, but they want to come forward and prosecute these cases. And I'll tell you, these are the most difficult cases as the government to win. I'll remember as a prosecutor, I would look at a case, it was BAH fraud, and I would ask, do we have a fraudulent marriage certificate? Do we have something that's been fabricated? If the answer to no was no to those, I'm like, I don't think we should prosecute. They don't do that today.
Yeah, it's a specific intent crime.
Correct.
It can't be something that you just accidentally stumbled on. Oh, I have more money in my LES this month than I thought I would. I must be committing fraud.
And the finance regulations are so Byzantine that it's hard to negotiate. I'll tell you, I've probably in the last 5 years, I've probably tried 6 of these cases, right, to members. And I've got 6 acquittals, right? And the reason is, first of all, there's not a panel member out there that when I ask the voir dire question, who's had it? Has anyone not had it? Or has everyone had a problem with finance? And all those hands go up.
Everybody.
And I'll tell you, there hasn't been a case where I haven't had someone dismissed from the panel because they had a preconceived notion of the ineptitude of finance.
Yeah. The other thing too is with respect to finance regulations, my experience is even the finance experts don't understand their own regulations all the time.
Right.
And so if they don't understand it, and they don't, which means that they aren't necessarily giving the correct instructions to the service member, well, how's a service member expected to follow the instructions? And they're not even the ones going into the computer and approving entitlements.
Right. And I'll tell you, there's so many ways to attack these cases, but let's just talk about it at the expert level, right? The government's going to come in and they're going to have their, financial center of excellence expert come in and say, here are the regulations and here's what you have to follow. A good cross-examination is going to get them to admit that, well, there are exceptions and there are changes. You bring in your expert who says, no, that's a misinterpretation. It could be interpreted this way, and we don't know what's done. So you've got expert 1 that says, version A, and expert 2 that says version A.1. And with version A.1, your client is not guilty, and version A, your client may be guilty. Well, guess what? Reasonable doubt. When you got 2 experts talking about finance, and you've got PFC Jones who's sitting there going, I just did what finance said, and the experts don't agree, how is Jones going to agree? No.
Yeah, and it's interesting you brought up reasonable doubt in this context. I mean, what is reasonable doubt? It's the absence of any other reasonable explanation but for guilt. But the world of finance is just ripe with other reasonable explanations other than guilt. And that's just one of them right there.
Right. I mean, your typical, we've all PCS'd many times. You go to a new duty station, you sign in, you go through your briefing, you've got whoever drew the short straw given the finance brief. They give the finance brief, tell you what documents you have to fill out. You get in a big long line like you did in basic training, and you sit there and they come by and say, let me see your documents, you sign here, fill out that, and they're directing you how to fill your voucher out, right? They're not filling it out for you, but they're telling you, oh, you can't do that because it has to match this receipt. And by the time you're done through that assembly line, yeah, you filled out the voucher and you signed it, but you relied heavily on the finance people to tell you what to do. And they are not nuanced in these regulations.
That's right. And that same exact problem is sometimes even exacerbated in times of deployment when BAH sometimes changes. And I mean, raise your hand if you ever deployed and you didn't actually get a TCS order. I mean, that's almost everybody. Nobody gets an individual deployment order. And in those times, you're talking about finance briefs in situations that we don't even exercise that type of brief very often. And so that's why times of deployment, you have to be extra careful.
Right. So the things that are most important to remember about these BAH fraud cases is that they're specific intent crimes. And if it's a specific intent crime, that means anything that your client did to try to remedy the situation cuts against specific intent, right? If they say they went to finance 4 times and tried to change the BAH, right? That's evidence of lack of specific intent to defraud, right? Or lack of specific intent to steal, right? Because you're showing them taking affirmative steps to fix what they believe is a problem. And I'll tell you, I didn't know this until I started trying these cases. What controls when you live overseas, when you go overseas unaccompanied, whatever address appears on your orders for your family members is what you're going to get BAH for the duration. So if your BAH says, some address in Smithville, Texas, right? And you decide, you know what, I want my family to live in the Bronx. And they go to Smithville, and a week later you move them to the Bronx, you're still going to get Smithville BAH no matter what. You can't change it.
Yep.
Vice versa. If your orders say go to the Bronx and you say, okay, they're there, now a week later I want them to move to Smithville, you're entitled by law to get Bronx BAH no matter where they live.
That's right.
And CID doesn't know that. Investigators don't know that. A lot of finance clerks don't know that. They're just saying it's on your orders. That's all we can pay is what's on your orders, regardless of where they really live.
It's such a complicated area of law. You would think that there was more discretion in bringing these types of cases because nobody understands it. I mean, except for people in this law firm who have experience with dozens of these types of cases, but no one else does.
Right. It's essential that if you're facing allegations of BAH fraud, you get a lawyer who's tried several of these cases because they'll be on top of what the recent changes are, and they're going to know how to go do the investigation on this case. I just recently flew out to San Francisco from Germany to do a site visit to an address to find out whether or not this was really a real address. Do you think the government had done that?
No,
they had not. So I now have evidence, pictures, utility bills, gas bills for this location as being real. Their theory of the case is that it's a made-up address. What do? You got to outwork the government, and that's what we'll do here.
I mean, you would think that that'd be a real easy thing to check, but they don't.
No, they don't, because they have their system of doing things, and if they have to do anything outside of their system, it's real hard for them to do that. But BAH frauds are the most difficult for the government to win, and frankly, there's really so much error that's built into that system just by the way it's set up.
Yeah, and here's a piece of kind of preventative law, if you will. What I advise a lot of people is, whenever you're in a finance brief, pull out your green book and just start taking notes. Take notes on everything that you're being told, because we can use that later on when we're trying to figure out what information did you get exactly. The other thing too is, if you do find yourself in a situation where you just have a whole bunch of extra money in your LES, okay, that's not a gift from God. Something's messed up, and you might have to pay that back at some point. So don't go spending it.
Right, put it aside. Know that when you don't get overpaid because they think you're doing a really good job in the motor pool, right? It's usually some mistake. So if you're facing BAH charges, and whether it's a court-martial or an Article 15 or even a GOMAR, you need to contact somebody who's handled these cases before. And that's us, the Law Office of William Helixon. We are your warrior advocates. You defend the nation. We defend you.